More than one ball player has been so sure he's good that he starts missing easy catches. It's like that with driving a car. The National Safety Council says a really good driver never takes anything for granted. He expects the unexpected and is prepared to react fast. Quick thinking in a pinch is a lifesaver. So don't take a thing for granted when you're at the wheel. Overconfidence can dull the sharpest reflexes. Many of the 37,000 people killed on our highways last year might still be alive if good drivers never relied on chance. Drive as though your life depended on it. It does, and so do the lives of others. Live up to the rules. Drive carefully and courteously, too. Watch for warning signs. Obey posted speed limits. For your own protection, insist on strict law enforcement. When traffic laws are obeyed, deaths go down.
This has been an ABC Television Network film presentation.
You remember how much fun you had in an amusement park when you were a kid? Well, when you're a parent, you live it all over again through the eyes of your child. That's my little girl, Nancy. It's her first visit to this fabulous world of fun and frolic. A treat Alice and I had promised her before sending her on a visit to Grandma's. Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot to introduce Susie. Nancy would never forgive me. She's made Susie an important part of our family. You know how it is. When a little girl has no brothers or sisters, her doll can become pretty important. And sometimes, so help me, I almost think the girl, the doll, has a personality of her own. Sometimes the upkeep on Susie stretches our family budget. Nancy wants her to have dresses just like she has, and make sure Susie shares all the family treats. Well, it is amusing. And of course, we don't spoil her like this all the time. Nancy was only worried about one thing. Would she remember every single bit of excitement so she could tell it all to Grandma? Alice said roller coasters are all right. But she prefers riding in the family car. We both enjoy taking long drives together, and this one had a special purpose. We were on our way to pick up Nancy. She had been with Alice's mother for a week. It seemed a lot longer than that. The house had been so quiet. But we did have Susie to keep us company. With everything that Nancy had to take on the plane, there just hadn't been room for a playmate the size of Susie. Then, less than a half an hour out of town...
Gee, watch out!
Although we were both wearing seatbelts, Alice was badly shaken up. I blame myself for maybe driving a little too fast. You always feel guilty at a time like this, even when it's the other fellow's fault. I'd have to get Alice over to Dr. McAllister right away. Then we discovered something that gave us both a genuine shock. What if this had been Nancy?
I examined both Mr. and Mrs. Norwood and was happy to tell them that apart from a few abrasions and shattered nerves, they had suffered no serious injury. If they hadn't been wearing their seatbelts, however, the verdict would have been different, disastrously different. I thought I was through with my patients when my eyes fell on another casualty. Mr. Norwood was a bit embarrassed until I told him about my work with dolls that had survived car collisions. As a medical consultant for the Institute of Transportation and Traffic Engineering, I examined the dolls that represented children and the dummies that represented adults in a scientific collision staged by the University of California at Los Angeles. Strategically placed cameras covered everything that happened during impact. We were especially interested in what happened to children with and without belts because this subject had not been explored. But even though they were only dolls, and even though these were scientific experiments, we couldn't avoid a feeling of tension and a sense of impending tragedy. For several months, the collision experiments continued at different speeds, at different points of impact, sometimes with the passengers belted, sometimes unbelted. Speeds such as these of 30 and 40 miles an hour may be moderate by today's driving standards, but not to the motorist slammed about against glass and metal. Children should never be allowed to stand on the seat of a car. Sitting tends to restrict body movement generated by the forces of impact to the rear seat. In many cases where the children were not restrained, our diagnosis of probable injuries showed that they would have been killed. Babies held on laps were thrown completely out of the car. Even in the most severe collisions, university findings showed that the infants were safest in bassinets, with the long axis of the bassinet aligned with the longitudinal axis of the car and strapped in this position. We also found that infants or children must never be held on the lap and restrained with the adult's belt, as collision forces tend to crush the child. Perhaps you think a collision can never happen to you, but the children will be safer if you admit that it could and prepare accordingly. I wish that everybody could see these scenes, because I don't believe that anyone who did would ever let the children go riding unrestrained again.
Of course, I had already made up my mind to have the back seat belts installed while the car was in the shop. And we never go anywhere now that we aren't all safely belted. Oh, yes. You're probably wondering about Susie. Dr. McAllister knew where to send us, and now she's as good as new. She may be only a doll, but she's never left out. And that includes a safety belt for Susie.
Many people who would do anything to protect their children do nothing to save them from injury, pain, or death in the motor accidents that can happen at any time. This is a frank appeal to all mothers and fathers. Without restraints, such as safety belts, the rear seat of an automobile in itself is not adequate protection. University research shows that children who will otherwise be killed can live to prove that safety is no accident.
The new superhighways are known by various names depending on where you live. You might call them expressways, turnpikes, parkways, or throughways. In this motion picture, we will use a term popular in the West. This is a freeway. Only for cars, trucks, buses, and motorcycles. There are no traffic lights or stop signs. You are allowed to park only in an emergency. There are no streets to cross your path. The freeway has a divider strip in the center with several lanes for traffic in two directions. Separate ramps are used for entering and leaving the freeway. The point where two or more freeways cross is an interchange. It might have 4 levels, but most are 1-level separations. As you will see, interchange traffic requires special driving procedures. These new superhighways present many problems for the motorist. Automobiles are moving at high speeds. Often the traffic is very heavy. Thousands of cars use the freeways every day. Any vehicle can make a sudden, dangerous move at any time. Motorists must learn to think and plan ahead. Superhighway can be very confusing. Plan your entire... Never drive your car on any superhighway when the vehicle has worn-out tires, bad brakes, or other mechanical problems. Dangers are multiplied at high speeds. Your car might stop running. You might have an accident. Be certain that your car is in top condition. Then you are ready to do at a time. Don't try to jump across several in a single move. It is safer to drive with the prevailing speed on the highway. But if you must drive slower, stay in the right-hand lane. Don't block traffic. Allow at least 1 car length for every 10 miles on your speedometer. When you are moving at 60 miles an hour, it takes the distance of half a city block to stop. You're in danger if you assume the car you follow will maintain between your car and the one in front. You'll need that space if he meets an emergency or makes a mistake. You don't save time by riding on top of the next car. If the slower moving car would stay in the right-hand lane, accident hazards like this one might be avoided. And now you're at the interchange. Curves and heavy traffic call for special precautions. Signs like this one indicate the lane you want to take. Look for these markers before you arrive at the interchange. If you need... Law enforcement officers have 3 warnings for every motorist, regardless of driving experience. Each of these warnings should be observed for better driving and to prevent accidents. First, never stop your car on the freeway. And never get out of your car in a lane of traffic. If your car has a flat tire, stalls, or develops other trouble, stay inside and bring it to the extreme right. Your life is worth more than a tire. Save yourself before you save your car. And exit your car on the right-hand side. Second, never drive if you are tired. If your eyes close for just a fraction of a second, you're in immediate danger. Park your car and rest. Third, keep your mind on your driving and not on other matters. Watch the vehicles in front of you on the freeway, and remember the cars behind you, too. Check your rear view mirror frequently. Look out for sudden stops, and be ready for any emergency. You'll meet many of them in your freeway driving. There safely. That's another reason for planning your route before you begin the trip. And you must maintain a much slower speed. Remember the freeway tips expert drivers practice all the time. The multi-million-dollar freeway systems help you travel rapidly and safely, usually. But try to avoid traffic jams like this. If you see a tie-up ahead or hear a radio bulletin, if possible, turn off and use an alternate street. Freeway driving calls for excellent drivers and excellent cars, each of them in the best condition. There are lots of rules and regulations to remember, that's true. You must discipline yourself to follow the proper procedures and form good driving habits. It isn't a snap to drive on the turnpikes, parkways, expressways, and freeways, and not every motorist can do it well. You pay for your mistakes, one way or another. But there is no reason...